Welcome to this afternoon's webinar. My name is Lindsay. The webinar will be on data visualization and storytelling best practice. I will take you through a best practice framework, a way of thinking about designing good charts and visuals with a couple of examples. I have a couple of my colleagues from Flourish also on the call, so if you have any questions whilst I'm talking, just post them in the chat and they will be able to reply to you. And as always, if you have other questions, feel free to email Flourish after the webinar if there's any other questions that aren't covered off in the next half an hour. So let's jump in. So this is a simple framework that I've put together to help people think about some simple steps to create great charts and data graphics. And I guarantee if you step through each of these 5 principles and think about each of your design decisions for on each of them, you'll come out with a better chart at the end. Just to walk you through these 5 principles, the first one is one of the most important ones, which is your story. So identifying what you want the reader to take away from your chart is the most important thing to do at the beginning. And I find lots of people forget to do this, and it kind of causes you problems all the way through the design process, because if you're not clear about what you want to say, it's very hard to make good design decisions on conveying that message clearly and easily for someone else to understand. So story is one of the most important things to think about first. Second of all, to really think about the best chart type that shows the relationship that you want to explain in your data. Again, lots of people forget to think about this step and just tend to use the chart types they know. Normally bar and line charts serve the purpose absolutely fine and are the right choice of charts, but sometimes people even confuse the two and use the line chart when they should be using a bar, and vice versa. But also there are different chart types, many different chart types that people don't think about, that can show a relationship or a story better if you use it instead. So if you think about data that's in a hierarchy, then you may think about using donut charts or tree maps or sunburst charts to explain that part to whole relationship. All templates that we have in Flourish to make it easy to create all these chart types. And so this is, quite an important step in your design journey. Thirdly, something I've called numeric, but this is thinking about the kind of decisions on the numbers within your chart. So decisions about the metrics that you want to display. Do you want absolute numbers? Do you want percentage change? These sorts of things, and you should choose the metrics that show the best relationship in your data, or portray the story that you want to tell in the easiest way. Also things like sorting your data. So if you have categories, not just leaving them as alphabetical order, but sorting them in a numerical order so that people can see the pattern. I see this a lot, people not thinking about sorting, which is such an easy thing to change and makes it much easier for someone to understand. Fourthly, color choices. So the choice of color that you use in your charts is probably one of the biggest decisions, and sometimes people don't really put a lot of attention on this, but you should choose colors that emphasize your point, and bold colors to draw out your story, and fade out less important information using gray. And so these kind of contrasting and colors can really make a big difference to how your chart comes across to someone. And lastly, labeling. So using labels and annotations directly on your chart to reiterate your message. Again, sometimes people seem a bit scared to put text on their chart, but it is really important. It really helps people understand what you're trying say, to add a bit of text to reinforce your message. But that said, not to add so much text that it overwhelms the chart. So it is a balancing act. So with these kind of 5 principles in mind, I will take you through a couple of examples. Because we only have such short time, I'm just going to take you through a line and bar chart example. But considering this is kind of the bread and butter of chart types, it covers off quite a lot of what people want to do, but also it shows you how all these little design decisions, even in a basic bar or line chart, can have a massive impact on how easy it is to understand your chart, and how nice a chart can look if you put a lot of thought into these things. So if I go to my preview mode, so the first example I'm going to take you through is a line charts of interest rates for different countries. So these are interest rates for these 6 countries over time. And the kind of focus of the story is how these interest rates have changed over time. So using our 5 steps, what decisions do we make about making this chart easier for a reader to understand and take away the message that we want them to take away? So first of all, we start with the most important first step, as I mentioned before, defining your story and what the main messages you want someone to take away. And a helpful tip is to summarize this in your chart title. And once you have this chart title, you can refer back to it for all the other design elements of your chart. So it's really helpful to write your chart title down first to help you formulate your story. So here, rather than just have interest rates, which is the data that I'm plotting, I'm having my descriptive title, which is describing what I want the person to take away from the chart. And this is that interest rates have been falling since the financial crisis and have even gone negative in some countries. So first of all, the person understands what the thing that you want them to take away from this chart. That's the first step. Then the second step is, what is the right chart type to present this information? So it's time series data. It's a change in pattern over time, and so we would naturally go to a line chart, and this seems like a good option, but I'll come back to this later on, because there might be some slightly better way of showing these line charts that help people understand this main message. So next, what's the next thing we think about? Labeling and annotation. So I'm not a fan of legends, and having legends below or above a chart is a lot of kind of mental processing for a reader. They have to keep looking back and forward from the legend to the line, and so it's much easier to label directly on the chart, and much easier for a reader to see which series is which. So that's the first thing I've decided to change. Then the second thing is to add annotation to help reference certain events that explain our story. So adding a reference line in here for the financial crisis, because that is the trigger for rates falling. And again, more annotation to draw people's attention to the, not annotation, now moving on to our decisions on colour. So using colour to draw our attention, or draw the reader's attention to the fact that the axis has gone negative, which they might have missed before. So reinforcing the 0 line with a slightly more solid line, and shading the negative area to show that these countries are the ones that are going into negative interest rates. This helps reinforce this second part of our message. And you can see that this is all starting to make it much easier for people to see our story. But then sorry, if I go back to this one, it's still really hard to see what's happening to the different countries because there's kind of a bit of a spaghetti mess. And so if we split this out into a grid of charts, we can separate out all the different countries. We don't need the line labels anymore because we've got little titles above each grid of charts. And this makes it much easier for people to see what's happening to each country, but by keeping the axis at the same scale, comparing between countries. So this automatically seems like a nice way to present it. Then I think about, if we change this to a slightly different chart type, does it help again reinforce our message? So here, if we change it to an area chart, we then are using this color filling to really emphasize where the countries where interest rates have gone negative. And so this actually might be a better chart type for this example. And then again, we think about our color choices. So we want color to mean something, and even though this is very pretty, it's not very helpful. And so we can, rather than have loads of different colors, we can just change to 2 contrasting colors. And this helps people see that these 2 countries are part of the group where rates haven't gone negative, and these countries are the ones where rates have gone negative. And then we can reinforce this colouring in our title. So so again, it's just reinforcing our message, drawing our title into our chart, associating them by colour. And these are all just little tips and tricks to help your chart just make it much easier for people to understand. So if I'm just going to jump into the Flourish editor, I just wanted to step through that decision-making process first, to show the kind of end-to-end design process in getting from one state to another. But I'll just jump into the editor to show you how to do some of these things. So this is what we started off with. And I'm sure most of you are familiar with all these different options in the editor. Again, here, this is where you can put your chart title in, and it be your descriptive chart title. And this is where you can add labels on the lines. So you don't have to have this legend anymore. So this is a new example in, this is a new feature of our latest template, these line labels, and you have lots of different ways of formatting it if you want to make this a straight line rather than a step line, different colors and longer, etc. So you can have a play around with that. This is how you turn your legend off, so you don't have the double labeling. And just to go down here, and then we have access highlights. So this is how you can bring it in, this reinforcing of the 0 line. So you can put in a reference line at 0 and have a play around with that. So you might not want it dashed, and you might not want it quite so thick, but you can have it. And then again, this is where you can shade, sorry, this is where you can shade below the 0 line in that kind of nice red to draw attention to this. So these are how you add these sorts of things in. And then again, you're probably familiar with this. This is how you can bring it out into a grid of charts. Again, you don't want your labels on anymore, so you can take those off. So these are all the kind of little design decisions that you can make to make your chart easier to understand. And this kind of user-friendly options that Flourish have allow you to make all these little design decisions. Oh, and lastly, just one thing that takes a little bit of custom coding is changing the color of things in your chart title. You can do this with a bit of HTML coding. So you can highlight the word that you want colored with a span, bit of that negative red in the title. So if you're a custom coder, you're happy to get your hands dirty with a little bit of coding, you have all these other kind of interesting design options at your disposal as well. Okay, so hopefully that's helpful. On to my second example. Oh, sorry. So just to summarize what we did, this story and these slides will be available to you afterwards. And this is just a summary about what we did for each step to improve our chart. So you can click through here and see that we summarized our story in our descriptive title, the chart type decisions we made, the ordering from positive to negative rates, the color choices, and the labeling. So this is just a summary to help you after the webinar, to help you see all the different decisions that were made to get from one state to another. So my second example is on a bar chart, again, another very popular chart type. And an example I've used for this is the average number of furloughed hours per region. So it's quite topical. And as you can see, there's quite a lot of furlough hours per worker. And so how do we make this chart easier for people to understand? So the first thing is that kind of those numerical decisions about order. So this is just in a random order, it's not that helpful. So if we sort this bar chart, we can, the sorting from the smallest number of furloughed hours to the greatest number of furlough hours helps people see if there's a pattern. So London has the lowest amount, and then kind of North and the Midlands have the highest amount of furlough hours. So think about this sorting and how it helps people see patterns. Second of all, again, adding annotation and labeling reference lines to your chart to help people interpret it. So here we're using something at 200 hours and labeling it as equivalent to 25 working days, just to put these numbers in context and help people understand what that actually means. And then just to think about, well, what if we change the focus of our story? So before, in the chart before, it was about hours being similar across regions. They're all over 200 hours and they don't vary that much. But maybe we want to focus on the variation between regions. So we want to see that London has less furloughed hours per worker than the Midlands. So people try and do this, they try and cut off their bar chart axis to help show small differences. But this is not best practice thing to do, and Flourish won't work well if you try and do it. It will keep these labels at the axis. And so it's kind of telling you that this is not a good thing to do, because you're not making an accurate comparison by chopping off the bar. So another way to think about doing this is to think about using a different metric. So here we're using the difference from the UK average to show this, and now and again we're using annotation and labeling to highlight what this 0 means. So this is the average for all regions, and London is nearly 8 hours less. 8 hours less on average of furloughed hours per worker compared to the Midlands, which is 6 hours more. And so this is that thinking about your metric that you're plotting and how you're telling your story through that metric. This is one of those decisions. Again, use of color. I mean, you don't need to use color for this, but you could use color to draw out your extremes, to focus the attention on the bars that you want people to look at. And again, using coloring in your title to just draw your title into your chart and get people to associate the color to a certain thing. So I will just jump again back into the editor to show you how to do some of these things. So the sorting is in your chart type, and you can sort by value very quickly by sorting like this. So that's quite easy to do. And adding annotation, again, that's a new feature of Flourish. And you can add annotation here by clicking on the little pen and writing something. So this is how I added in the equivalent to 25 working days. And then you can format this. So there's lots of different formatting options. You can have an arrow, which is what I had. You can format the color and the stroke. And you, so you'll see, sorry, I haven't made it big enough, the axis, to put this in, but and then you can duplicate this and make different annotations for mobile phones. So you might not want it to show up as, or you might want to have a cut down version of annotations for mobile phone because they get cut off on the smallest screen. But I'm sure we'll be doing another webinar on annotations, but just to make you aware of that's how you do it in the story player. Right. So again, just at the end of this section, we've got a little summary of the things that we stepped through. So here, this is showing you the importance of your title. So in one set, we were talking about the similarity across regions in one chart, and in the other, we were talking about how it varies across regions, and depending on what your title was, dictated the choices about other things like chart type or metrics. So this kind of change from average or the absolute number. Again, we went for a bar chart because it was categorical. We chose different metrics depending on what thing we wanted to highlight. And we use colour to draw attention to those extreme categories. And we put that reference line in to show context so that people understood what 200 hours really meant. Okay, and on to our last example. So this is drawing together line charts and bar charts into telling a kind of best practice story, which is very easy in Flourish because you can bring it all together in our story player as well. So I'm going to use a very depressing COVID deaths data to step through how COVID deaths have changed throughout the year. So first of all, I'm plotting the average number of deaths that normally occur throughout the year with a line. And then I'm bringing in my bars to show the deaths not involving COVID. And this kind of animation, we're using the line chart as our reference line, and the kind of weightier bar charts bars being animated in to show how this differs from the reference line for average deaths. Then we're bringing in kind of more referencing, labeling, and reference lines to highlight when the lockdowns were. And we're using annotation again to highlight people to where we want them to look. So we want them to look at deaths not involving COVID or below average now. So we want them to look here, but they went above average in the first lockdown. But by using a story player, we can layer this messaging, so we can move to the other message in a different slide. So you're not overwhelming people. You're giving them one message at a time by stepping them through this animated slide and using annotation and color. to help focus them on what you want to draw their attention to. And then now we want to add in the COVID deaths. So, and we change our title to refer to the next message that we want people to take away. So this is that COVID-19 test took us well above this reference line, especially after the first lockdown, but they are on the rise again now. And we can use arrows to show, as annotation, to show direction. And lastly, in Flourish, because we can use filtering, we can use different filter view to show the pattern or shape for just COVID deaths. And when you do this, it's quite interesting because you can then see just in the first lockdown that COVID deaths went up nearly equal normal number of deaths in a year. And you can see this pattern a bit more easy where it's much lower in summer and it's rising again. So that's kind of using best practice, but to step through several messages within a story. And again, just summarizing what we did, we adapted the titles for the different messages in each slide. So every slide, we slightly changed our title to tell the person what we wanted to take from that slide. We combined line and bar charts, using the line as a reference point for average deaths and the bars to plot out our main series. We used absolute number of deaths to give a sense of scale and the 5-year average for a reference line to kind of average out any kind of extreme years. And we used a filter to help show how the pattern was for the COVID deaths if we didn't include normal deaths. And then we used these kind of bold, accessible colours to draw attention to different messages. So the bright red for COVID to draw attention to it. And then the kind of annotation to help tell our story in the different slides and explain what we wanted people to take from those parts of the data. I've got 1 minute left, so I'm just going to show you one last chart type, which I'm not going to step through in any detail, but just to really emphasize the importance of color choice, which is something I think is not maybe thought about as much. And that is this really beautiful heat map, which is looking at UK energy production and how it has become greener over the years. So I just wanted to chuck this in here because it shows how colour is being used actually to draw out the pattern and tell the story. So going from this very these coal heavy years where UK energy production was more coal intensive to this very bright green where we're basically not using coal at all anymore. And I just thought this is a really powerful example to show how colour can be so important in your chart design. So that takes me to 3:30. I saw a couple of questions popping up, so hopefully the team have managed to answer them. But if you have any more questions, feel free to email us and we can respond after the seminar. I hope you've enjoyed it. It will all be available as on our YouTube channel and the slides too, so you can browse through at your leisure. Thank you so much for joining us.